Okay, chapter 1. It was a warm night for November, too warm for witches, all the stories said. Witches were supposed to be extinct, of course, but Xar had heard about the way they stank, and he imagined he could smell that now, in the quietness of a dark forest, a faint but definite stink of burning hair mixed with long dead mice and the little kick of a viper's venom. Once smelled, never forgotten. Xar, pronounced Zar, I don't know why the spelling is weird, was a young human boy who belonged to the wizard tribe. He was riding on the back of his giant snowcat in part of the forest so dark and mangled and tangled that it was known as the Bad Woods. He should not have been there, for the Bad Woods were warrior territory, and if the warriors were to catch him, well, what everyone said was Xar would be killed on sight. Off with his head, as the pleasant warrior custom. But Xar did not look even remotely worried. He was a cheerful scruff of a boy, with tremendous quiff of hair shooting upwards from his forehead, as if he had accidentally come into contact with some invisible vertical hurricane. The snowcat was called King Cat, a noble creature which was a giant form of lynx, far too dignified for his cheeky master. King Cat had shining paws so round they looked unreal, fur so deep it was like powder snow, and such a rich silver grey colour that it was almost blue. The snowcat ran swiftly but softly through the forest, his black-tipped ears swivelling from side to side as he ran, for he was scared, although too proud to show it. Only that very morning, Xar's father, Encanzo, the enchanter king of wizards, had reminded everyone that it was forbidden for any wizard to dare set one toe in the Bad Woods. But Xar was the most disobedient boy in the wizarding kingdom in about 4 generations, and forbidden things only encouraged him. In the past week, Xar had tied the beards of 2 of the eldest and most respectable wizards together when they were sleeping at a banquet. He had poured a love potion into the pig's feeding trough, so the pig developed a mad, passionate crushes on Xar's least favourite teacher and followed him around wherever he went, making loud, enthusiastic, squealing, kissing noises. He had accidentally burned down the western trees in the wizard camp. Most of these things hadn't entirely, intentionally, exactly, but Xar just got carried away in the heat of the moment. And yet, none of these disobedient things was half as bad as what Xar was doing right now. There were large black ravens flying above Xar's head. "This is a very bad idea, Xar," said the raven. The talking raven was called Caliburn, and he wouldn't have been a handsome bird, but unfortunately his job was to keep Xar out of trouble, and the worry of this impossible mission meant keeping his feathers falling out. It isn't really fair to lead your animals and sprites and young fellow wizards into all this danger. As soon as the king enchanter and a boy with a great deal of personal charisma, Xar had a lot of followers. A pack of 5 wolves, 3 snowcats, a bear, 8 sprites, an enormous giant called Crusher, and a small crowd of other wizard youngsters, all following Xar, as if hypnotised or shivering and scared, but pretending not to be. "Oh, you worry too much, Caliburn," said Xar, pulling King Cat to a halt and jumping off his back. "Look at this lovely, pretty little glade here. You see? Perfectly safe, and exactly the same as the rest of the forest." Xar looked around with a breezy satisfaction, as if he had stopped in a delightful woodland area filled with frolicking bunnies and baby deer, rather than a cold, eerie little clearing where yews leaned and threateningly and the mistletoe dripped like the warlock's tears. The other wizards drew their swords, and the growling snowcat's fur stood up with fear to such an extent it looked as if they were furry puffballs. The wolves padded restively, trying to form a protective circle around their humans. Only the smaller sprites shared Tsar's enthusiasm, but that was because they were too young to know any better. I don't know if you've ever seen a sprite, so I'd better describe one of these to you. There were 5 larger sprites, all faintly resembled a human crossed with a fierce, elegant insect. When irritated or bored, which was often, they blinked on and off like little stars. The purple smoke drifted out of their ears. They were so see-through, you could even see their hearts beating. Then there were 3 smaller, younger ones, who, because they're not adult yet, were known as hairy fairies. Tsar's favourite was an eager, slightly stupid little thing called Squeeze Juice. "Oh, it's lovely, it's lovely," squeaked Squeeze Juice. "It's the tremendously loveliest clearing I's ever seen. What's this interesting flower? Let me guess, it's a buttercup, it's a daisy, it's a geranium, it's a cauliflower." He flew up into the branches of a particular gloomy, sinister tree and perched on the edge of its fleshy flowers, which had ominous spikes on the ends of its leaves, and was in fact called a sprite-eating hobtrap. The flower snapped shut, and the briskness of the mousetrap capturing the poor little Squeeze Juice inside. Caliburn landed on Tsar's shoulder and gave a heavy sigh. "I don't like to say I told you so," said Caliburn, "but we've only been in this perfectly safe little clearing in the Bad Woods for 1.5 minutes, and you've already lost one of your fellow followers to a carnivorous flower." "Nonsense," scolded Tsar good-naturedly. "I haven't lost him. That's the whole point of being a leader. Whenever my followers get into trouble, I rescue them, because that's what a good leader does." Tsar climbed the tree, 200 feet up, swaying precariously on the couple of creaking twig-like boughs. He took out his dagger and popped open the sprite-eating hobtrap to release the panting little Squeezy Juice in the nick of time. "I'm fine," squeaked Squeezy Juice. "It's fine. I can't feel my left leg, but it's fine." "Don't worry, Squeeze Juice. That's just the hobtrap digestive juices. The feeling will return in a couple of hours," Tsar called out as he dropped down from the tree. "You see, I'm a great leader. Stick with me and you'll be fine." The wizard youngsters looked very thoughtful indeed. At that moment, Tsar's older brother, Luta, came out of the shadows behind them, sitting astride a great grey wolf, and followed by even more sprites and animals and young wizard followers than Tsar himself. Tsar stiffened because he hated his brother Luta. Luta was a lot bigger than Tsar. He was nearly as tall as their father, and he was brilliant at magic, and he was good-looking and clever, and my goodness, didn't he know it. He was the smuggest smug wizard you could have possibly imagined, and he often sneaked on Tsar to get Tsar into trouble. "What are you doing here, Luta?" stormed Tsar suspiciously. "I just followed you to see what unbelievably stupid and pointless thing my ickle baby brother was doing at this time," drawled Luta. "Great leaders like me don't do pointless expeditions," fumed Tsar. "We're here for a reason, and it's none of your business." But Tsar considered telling Luta some elaborate lie about what he was doing, but he couldn't resist showing off. "We're going to catch ourselves a witch," boasted Tsar proudly. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. This is the first time that Tsar had mentioned to his followers the purpose of their expedition, and it was very unwelcome news indeed. "Oh, witch!" The bear and the snowcats and the wolves went very still and began to shake. Even Ariel, the wildest and most unafraid of Tsar's sprites, shot up into the air and momentarily disappeared. "There are witches in this part of the Bad Woods now." "I know it," whispered Tsar, excitedly, as if a witch was a delightful sort of presence, and he was offering to everyone. There was a long silence, and then Luta and his fellow wizard followers began to laugh. They laughed and they laughed and they laughed. "Oh, come on, Tsar," Luther said at last, once he'd got his breath back. "Even you must know that witches have been extinct for centuries." "Ah, yes," said Tsar. "But what if some of them survived and have been hiding all this time? Look, here's what I found in the clearing only yesterday." Out of his rucksack, he carefully took an absolutely gigantic black feather. It was huge, like the feather of a crow, but much, much larger. A soft black fading at the end of a glowing dark shiny green, the colour of a marlin's head. "It's a witch feather," whispered Tsar. Luther smiled, his most superior smile. "That's just the feather of some big old bird," scoffed Luther. "Some giant crow. You get some weird things living in the bad woods." Tsar frowned and hung his feather from his belt. "I've never seen a bird as big as this one," said Tsar grumpily. "It's all nonsense," smiled Luther. "Only a brainless fool like you wouldn't know that. Witches were destroyed forever." Caliburn flapped downwards and landed on the king cat's head. "Forever is a long word," said the raven. "You see," said Tsar triumphantly, "Caliburn is a bird of omen who can see into the future and into the past, and he doesn't think that witches are gone forever. All I know is if witches were not to be extinct for some reason, you wouldn't want to go meeting one in a dark place like this," said Caliburn, shivering. "What do you want a witch for, Tsar?" "I'm going to catch the witch," said Tsar, "remove its magic and use it for myself." There was another horrified silence. Eventually Luther spoke. "That, little brother, is the worst plan that I've ever heard in the whole history of plan making." "You're just jealous you didn't think of it," said Tsar. "I have a few questions," said Luther. "How are you going to catch a witch in the first place?" "That's what nets are for," said Tsar, taking a net out of his rucksack and holding it up. You couldn't fault his enthusiasm, at least. "One of us will volunteer to be wounded ever so slightly, and then blood will attract the witch." "Oh, great," smiled Luther. "Now you're going to wound one of your sad little followers in a forest stuffed with raving werewolves and blood-sniffing ogre breaths. Come on, you're completely crazy. This plan is as pathetic as you are." Tsar ignored him. "And then I'll entangle the witch in this net when it attacks. Next question." "Okay, question 2, said Luther. "No living wizard has ever seen a witch. So how are you going to know what one looks like?" Tsar opened his rucksack and took out a book the size of a large atlas entitled The Spelling Book. Every wizard is equipped with a spelling book, given to them at birth. Tsar was looking extremely worse for wear. One part was invisible. It accidentally got dropped in an invisibility potion. Another was burned so black that you could barely read it. This happened when Tsar was set the wizard camp on fire. And many of the pages were loose and dropping out all over the place. Too many adventures to go into here. Tsar opened the book to the contents page, which he had 26 letters of the alphabet written in very large gold strip. Tsar spelled out witches by tapping each letter in turn, and the book turned its pages, which seemed to go on forever, and eventually the chapters in front turning invisible as the book rifled through the rest of them endless pack of cards, until eventually stopped in the right place. "That's weird. It doesn't say what they look like, but they're green, I think," said Tsar. "Someone else thought witches could turn invisible and they had acid blood. Another said they squirted blood through their eyes." "I'm sure I'll recognise one when I see it," said Tsar, impatiently shutting the spelling book. "They're supposed to be pretty horrible, aren't they?" "Awesomely horrible," said Caliburn gravely. "The most terrifying creatures that ever walked this earth." "So even if you do catch this witch, how will you persuade it to part with its magic?" "Luther, I'm imagining that invisible green acid squirting witches are the most terrifying creatures that ever walked the earth will not give up their magic if we just ask them, pretty please? Aha, said Tsar craftily. I've thought of that. With a grand flourish, he put on some gloves and reached into his rucksack and took out a small saucepan. Silence again. You realise that's a saucepan? Said Luther. This is no ordinary saucepan, said Tsar cunningly, and he took a deep breath before he made his shocking announcement. This particular saucepan is made out of iron. Most of the wizards took a horrified step back, with the sprites let out a shriek of alarm, and Luther alone refused to be impressed. In fact, he laughed so hard Tsar thought he might fall over. This is too good. You're going to fight a saucepan? With a saucepan? Sneered Luther. And I'm going to pause it just there.